Hockey Report. We're back. A friend of mine, and Jack, I'm going to have you kind of tell yourself. We have new listeners, right? All of a sudden, like I joke around about it in this building that I've been doing this for like 9 seasons now, and until like 4 or 5 months ago, nobody really cared except for some hockey fans here. And you've been on the show before, Jack Skille, former Chicago Blackhawk. You played around a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit? First off, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I enjoy my conversations with you more than I should probably tell you because, like I was just telling you, I really like being around people that really understand hockey, and then I just try to steal and absorb every bit of information that you have so that I can look smarter or sound smarter.
I'm the same way.
So I really enjoy having you on the show. Can for the people that maybe didn't catch the episode you were on before or don't know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from and a little bit of your hockey career? You don't have to go as in depth as last time, but just like the summary of it, the cliff notes.
Jack Skille. I was born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin. Obviously, Midwest being a hockey hotbed that it is. Grew up playing with Phil Kessel and the Suter brothers and being coached by Bob Suter, Mark Johnson, my dad. I had Pete Johnson, Diana Schafering was my power skating coach. I had a lot of good coaches growing up. Had internal fuel early on as a kid. If there were no end boards, I'd be in the parking lot. Really loved working on my game at home. I believe I developed a lot there. And then was fortunate to climb the ranks. I played AA hockey in Wisconsin, ended up playing high school hockey, and then Tier 1 before and after the season for Team Wisconsin. Was an early commit to University of Wisconsin-Madison for full ride at 15. Went to the National Team Development Program shortly after that. Got drafted 7th overall by the Blackhawks my senior year. Then went on to play University of Wisconsin-Madison for 2 years, freshman year being a national championship title with the boys.
Who'd you beat that year?
We beat BC in the final in actually Milwaukee. And then signed after my sophomore year of college, played pro hockey, had some struggles, had some, salary cap things going on, business side of it, also, confidence struggles with the pro game. But ended up playing 368, I believe, NHL games. I was up for like 500, had some injuries, was the Tin Man for a little bit, and then finished my career in Europe. So probably, I think, close to 800 games professional under my belt. Just travel the globe. I've seen the game of hockey structured a multitude of ways, overseas, North American wise, and played with a bunch of different players from different nationalities.
Yeah, and how did you end up in Utah?
My wife. My wife, she's actually originally from Wisconsin, but she had been living out here in Park City about 4 years before I met her. And we actually met I have cousins that have lived in Park City for about 20 years. And Sarah knew them, was friends with them, and they ended up, setting us up. So the rest is history. Yeah.
Well, we're super, super grateful that you ended up here because I think it's people like you that have been helping. And I know that you've been coaching a lot in Park City. And anytime we can infuse somebody with, first off, your passion. And a lot of us have we'll have that passion, but then we don't have the experience. And it's fun. I was just talking to Nick Olchek. He was on the show last week. And I was talking about the difference between, just being a hockey player or actually just being raised in hockey. And I've talked to Jordan Parisi about this too. Like, it's different. You guys grow up, it's your life, it's your bread and butter. You get the dinner table conversations. It's just been your entire life, and then you bring that here, and you've still got the passion. Like when you talk about hockey, I remember the first time we talked. You're like, "Hey, I've got to be somewhere like 15, 20 minutes," and then we sat down. It was like an hour and a half. So I know that you still have the passion, and I love it. And I think somebody like you in this market is exactly what we've needed for a long time. We took Greg Lieb, and we just beat the crap out of him as far as like we made him coach. I made him coach everything I ever touched. And then everybody else learned like, oh, you got a guy like Greg Lieb and now Jordan Parisi comes into town or you're into town and we're vampires here. We're going to drain you for everything you got. So we're glad to have you in here. In the last few years, you've been doing a lot and man, it's so important for us.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Yeah, I am passionate. Sometimes I wonder where that passion comes from. It gets me into trouble sometimes. I've gotten a lot softer over the last couple of years, especially since I've been on the show. I've gotten my hands dirty in terms of digging up the details. And
Did you get positive and negative feedback from the last show?
No, I got mostly positive feedback, but I was still hot. I had just finished my pro career and in Salzburg for Red Bull, and pandemic and all that. We all lived it. It was disruptive in a lot of our lives, all of our lives, in different ways. So I was a little bit over the top, I think, at that point in time. I thought
you were dead on.
I was dead on. I was, at that point in time for sure. But it comes with grace, right? So heavy truth comes with heavy grace, and I've learned a lot of things since that point in time. So I have a lot of grace for a lot of people now. And it's more about, for me, since then, relationships,
Okay.
and building relationships and making sure that everything's positive. Because things in the youth hockey or youth sports world can get pretty negative pretty quick. And we lose sight of what's the most important, and it's these kids. So I would really like to see Utah continue to grow the game in a positive way, and the right people unite together and build those relationships.
So the NHL comes to town. None of us saw that coming. And
I did.
Okay. I maybe have maybe had a little bit of a heads up, but not as much.
Not to gloat, but I kind of had a good feeling.
Yeah. So the NHL comes to town, and now it's going to make an impact on youth hockey that, unless you've been in those other markets, unless you've seen what happened in Vegas, and I got to see a little bit of what happened in Phoenix when the Coyotes first went to Phoenix. And I got to see that market change quite a bit. And then, raising a kid here that played hockey and seeing the other markets, and then watching what happened with Vegas, watching what's happened in Seattle, watching what happened in Colorado even with, once the NHL comes to town, everything changes.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think people should expect? How much do you dare to say right now, first off? I don't want to get you in any trouble, and I don't want you to burn any bridges. But what do you think's going to happen, and what should we start telling the parents? Like, okay, and Utah Hockey Club just released the thing, like, hey, we're going to do all these things, and we're going to be in every facet that we can find: street hockey, roller hockey, ice hockey. We're going to be everywhere. We're going to be doing everything, and they've got good reasons to do that, and they've got good funding to do that, and then they're bringing in like NHL experienced people and people that have helped those other markets grow. So with that setup, what do you think is about to happen here?
Well, I think that's a tough question to answer, directly. I think the potential is huge. I think that there's a lot of excitement around the sport, more than we've ever seen, and I think parents and families should be excited. There's going to be a lot of change, and there's going to be massive waves and ripple effects of this. And like I said before, I'd like to be ultimately overall healthy, and I think they will. I think the main thing that needs to be considered is the current leadership of our state. If they haven't embraced this, if they aren't excited about it, which I think they are, and I would hope that they're embracing it, helps Utah Hockey Club get what they need done. There's going to be some changes. There's going to be new ways of thinking, because that's how this hockey world works. You bring in people that are experienced in this realm, that have played, have coached, have lived it. They're going to have a lot of healthy input. And if it's met with resistance, if it's met with red tape, in the end, the only people negatively impacted by that are the people resisting and placing the red tape.
Well, and temporarily the kids that are around those people resisting.
Yeah, yes. And the kids, yeah, sure, they'll be negatively impacted for a little bit, but in the end, a powerhouse like the NHL always wins. So if you're leadership in this state, you're going to want to give them what they want. And you're going to want to be on their side of things, not on the other side of the table. And I think the sooner we can get to that point, the better for the kids. That's what I would like to see.
And I'm just going to say, I said something. I was in a meeting a couple of weeks ago before one of the games, and I had a bunch of people come to the Firehouse, and it's a bunch of people that run. They're in leadership, and they're in media, and they're in all this other stuff, and they've been involved in hockey for a long time. And it's people they've been sacrificing their own time, their own money, their heart and their soul, and they're doing everything they can to keep hockey going. And basically my message to them was, thank you so much for everything you've done. And this includes me. I've been coaching here for 20 plus years, but at some point I realized I need to get out of the way. And I think, and I don't want to say it, I don't want people to take it wrong, because you're going to be on this side or that side. I don't want people to take it wrong. It's not like the evil empire coming to take over. It's the experience. You've done all this work. Now get out of the way, because you're going to reap the benefits. We've seeded the market. All the kids are ready to play hockey. We've got more rinks than we had when I was growing up here. We're going to get more rinks. We've got one coming up by you in Park City. We got one going in St. George. We got the two new sheets going in Sandy. And I know that there's more coming. And I keep dropping hints that there's going to be one in the Saratoga Springs, Eagle Mountain area. Where the kids are, they're going to be rinks. And I don't want to be like, it's us or it's that way or the highway or whatever, but it is kind of that way. It's like, okay, we've done it. Now all the people with the knowledge of how to put the programs in place to make these kids, number one, just better people, better players, more fun, more passion. And I think, and they're paid professionals, they're not parents, which I think helps a lot, because whether you mean to or not, you're going to have some bias when you're
and I think, and speaking into that point, I think if you look at the cyclical process of the last decade in Utah, I've been here for 6 years, and I've gotten a healthy dose, and I've learned about the history when I moved here. Usually the cycle has been wealthy parent has a kid in the youth organization, feels like they have the monetary resources to create a lot of change, feels like they have all the answers that other people don't, and they feel like they're different from the previous wealthy parents that came before them.
Yeah.
And it's a natural cycle, and I understand it, and I have empathy for it. We want to help our kids, and when we have monetary resources to back that, it makes sense to get involved. Historically speaking, everybody that has gotten involved, once their kids are done at 18U, they're done.
Yeah.
So what does that say to me, right? Are you really in it to grow the game, or are you in it because you want to do something for your kid? And I understand that too. What we have right now is a passing of the torch moment. To your point, there's been a lot of people, blood, sweat, and tears, and monetary money, have put things on the line to build and help grow the game, and that's amazing. And maybe we're missing some resources that other places with NHL organizations or influence has had, but now we have it, and now it's like you're not negated. All that work is not negated. It's not in vain. It's you've laid the foundation to be able to pass the torch. Now let's not fight over the torch. Just hand it over.
Yeah.
Right? And if you hand it over, there's a good chance you're going to be retained because you have that experience and you've been helpful. And that's really, in essence, what the game of hockey is about. With this new scouting gig that I have, hired by my old GM for his company, Team 33, I'm able to sit up with the other scouts of the league during the games. I sat in the last 3 games. It's an amazing experience for me. I'm learning a lot from them in conversations. I'm building relationships with people around the league. I'm developing my coaching eye. I'm learning about what to look for in players, how to articulate it on paper. And it's a great experience for me. But what I've really noticed the most about the NHL level is all of these guys, although they're scouting from different teams, they're in the same room, they're buddies. They're not bickering.
Right.
They're having a healthy conversation. They're sharing information because they're like you and me. They want to learn. They're going to take something away that, somebody says in that room. And they're going to say, wow, that was a great way of putting it for that player. I never, articulated it that way. I'm going to use that. Maybe you shared something with them. It's a constant collaboration, even through discussions and relationships. I'd like to see that in the youth hockey world.
Yeah.
I don't want to attend a meeting at UAHA and have to grab a bag of popcorn because we got a bunch of adults around a round table bickering.
Yeah.
Because really, at the end of the day, now if we're bickering, we've lost sight of what matters here.
And there's a lot of bickering.
There
has been. I haven't been to one of those meetings in years, but
I think that there's a cycle change right now at the UAHA board level. There's some new people, new faces sitting there, and I think that they have, great intentions, and I think that they're trying to make things happen and, give credit when credit's due. They're also donating their time. They're volunteers. They're busy people, 9 to 5s. They're going there and they maybe have had a really bad work day. And they're going to this meeting at the evening, and this is probably like, another UAHA meeting where we're going to fight and argue, right? But they're dealing with it. I'm not, right? So I can't sit there and judge them. But at the same time, it's kind of like, well, hey, guys, like there's a dialogue here. Like there's a respectful way to go through it. And I think that that's happening. I hope that's happening. I haven't attended a UAHA meeting in a long time. But I think that there needs to be space for the NHL to sit at that table and Kristen Bonus to be heard and to understand their plan. And if you don't understand that plan, you ask more questions. Tier 2 hockey is established in the state. It's been established in the state. Tier 1 hockey has suffered because of that. A lot of people are deciding to go Tier 2 instead of Tier 1. And they have their reasons. And I'm not going to say and be dismissive and say that their reasons are incorrect. That's their life choice and that's their decision. But in reality, where that leaves Utah Hockey Club and Kristen Bonus is, well, man, we're coming in now into the room and we're an instant threat. And now we need to navigate and tiptoe around this instead of just saying, hey, this is what we need.
Yeah.
Give us what we need. Right? Let's make it happen. But instead, she's having to be politically correct. And I've, had
kind of a waste of time.
Yes.
It's kind of, because if we just.
For what? And it's like, it kind of boils down to ego, right? It's kind of like, why can't you just pass the torch?
Because if you look at the mission, if we all have the same mission and we all had different ideas of how to get there. But if you bring in somebody that's completed those missions in other markets, which Kristen has, right? And the NHL definitely has, the mission is to make hockey grow, to make the kids have fun. And that's the mission. Grow the sport, introduce it to more kids, and make sure those kids are having fun. Then you can worry about.
Well, what we're dealing with too is that what's going on in society, in my opinion, and what do I know? But when you look at social media, what social media taught us? Well, we get access to information at our fingertips and the internet and all that stuff as quick as we want. Couple clicks, open up our phone, boom, right there. And what I've seen is people in all different fields and industries are now becoming experts overnight because they saw an Instagram post
yeah.
or they may have read a book or they may watched a video on YouTube or whatever it is. And now, or they watched the show on Netflix and now they're an expert and it's guruism. We got life coaches. We got parent coaches.
Yeah.
We got people that know, there's people that are parent coaches that don't have kids, right? Like society, like how does that hook into hockey? It's like, well, now your kid plays hockey for 3 years, starting at 6U, and all of a sudden you know all the answers and you can run an organization. Well, you got guys like George Chalos, who's been in this for 30 plus years. He's still learning.
Yeah.
I played my whole life since I was 3. I've got 800 professional games or close to that number under my belt. I'm still a student of the game. The game is evolving. Everything's changing. USA Hockey makes a rule change. Well, now that's different. Or how does USA Hockey operate? I'm learning that stuff, right? And there's no way that anybody, I don't care how much money you have and how many times you've watched a video or you've had a conversation with somebody else in the hockey universe, there's no way you have all the answers. There's just no way. So we need to have this, we need to rethink it. Like we really need to rethink it in this state. And we need to consider things like, what is a healthy program, right? Like I have my academy in the off season. And what I've learned through countless conversations from people that have run programs on their own, scouts, assistant coaches, head coaches, whoever it is, right? I've learned that have been involved with youth hockey. I've pretty much boiled it down to like 3 pillars of success for any program in terms of retention. That's a successful program. If you have an 80% retention rate, you're pretty successful. Yeah. If you're having a mass exodus every single year, well, we got to look at our pillars. And the pillars of success in life for me are my family, my relationship with my wife, and my son, my relationship with my son. If any of those things get negatively impacted by a decision I make, I'm not making that decision. I'm not taking that job. I'm not spending my time in that place. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to surround myself around those people. So when you boil it down in life in that way, now let's hook that concept into an organization. One, in my opinion, parent hockey education needs to be a pillar.
Absolutely.
In this state, it's an emerging market. We're still learning. We're still new, right? Let's explain to the parents at 6U, like, what is 6U? What is Learn to Play? What is 8U? What is 10U? What happens at 12U? Are we just travel now? Or are we going to be tier 2? Are we going to have a tier 1 eventually down the line at 12U? Other states have it, right? 14U. What happens there? What happens with USA Hockey tryouts? What's the importance of that? That's what we should be up until from 6U to 14U. That's the development journey.
Right.
Get to that USA Hockey tryout and be one of the best players in your state. Then go and play regionals and be one of the best players in your Western region. Go to the development camp. Be seen by NAL and USHL and NTDP and all the fantastic things. And CHL too. We'll get phone calls, right? And what's the journey? What is the journey from entry level? So that's parent hockey education. What is tier 1? What is the reason for tier 1?
No.
Why do you play tier 1 hockey? Why do you play tier 2 hockey? Why do you elect in Wisconsin to play high school and then tier 1 before and after? Why is Minnesota high school hockey, like, why is their model so ironclad? And they've never changed. So what's going on there? Like, let's educate people. Then you have reputation and product. They're hand in hand. Your product's good. You got good coaches, right? You're consistent with your product and you're developing players. It's visible. Well, you got a good reputation then. And you're good with parents and you're relational with parents and you're informative and you're open-minded and you're available or you're approachable is the word. Okay? And then the third pillar, cost. What's the cost? Right? So if you have a through the roof cost, but you don't have a good reputation and you don't have a good product and you're not educating parent on what you're actually a parent on what you're actually doing and what they're paying for, you're going to have a mass exodus every single year, especially if your cost is really high. Because what we got to understand is mom and dad are the consumer.
Yep. They
put money on the line. That money comes with expectations. Unless it's like $200 for the year. Yeah. You want no expectations? You want no problems?
Make it cheap.
Make it cheap or free. Right? But if you're going to charge 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 grand for something, man, you better be delivering consistently and communicating that product.
Yeah.
And it better be visible. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of issues.
And I got to tell you, so in the 19 years I ran my camp, the last few years, this is when I realized, and I knew I should be getting out. But early on, I realized I wasn't the right one to coach, but I was the right one to organize. So my camps involved a lot of me hiring Jordan Parisi and hiring these other guys to bring in the experts and then get out of their way and just organize it. And I would go around and talk to the parents. We'd always have our beginning, and this is the same when I coached too. At the beginning of the year, we go in and I'd say, this is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to do it. This is how I'm going to coach, and this is why I'm going to coach this way.
These are my expectations of your behavior as a parent, your behavior as a kid. This is my expectations of my coaching staff to deliver our product. This is how we're going to handle issues if you have an issue. Yeah, exactly. That's the way you do it. You let them in on your plan. You let them see it. And if you do that and you deliver those things and they end up leaving, your answer's simple. I'm really sad to see you go. I hope you come back.
Yeah. It got to the point, though, and I thought, I remember I had 2 parents in 1 year. One came to me really bitter that in the morning practice for our goalies, there were no pucks. And I said, yeah, this is the foundation part. This is where we teach them how to skate. This is goalie movement, position specific movements. And I'm like, it even says it in the daily schedule that this is just.
Sometimes they don't read.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I got a little frustrated with that guy. And then I remember I also had yoga, and I'd hire awesome yoga instructors. And one of the parents came at me and he was just like, what is this yoga about? And where is it religious? And what, like, just, it was really weird vibe. And I said, you know what? Just grab your kid and go. Like, I don't want to deal, like, I don't want it. And then I just went home that day with my wife and I said, something's changing. It could be the atmosphere of parents. It could be me. I think I'm done. Like, I think I need to just get out of the way.
Well, here's the grace. I talked about grace. So this is what I've learned. I had like a little bit of an epiphany. I was laying in bed, was talking to my wife about it. I just don't understand. Like, help me understand what I'm missing here. And in the conversation, my wife is a really beautiful person. She really can articulate well, but through the conversation, she didn't exactly say it, but I had this epiphany. And it's, we've all had really crappy coaches.
Yeah.
I mean, think of the time that our generation of people, when we were growing up, the screamers we had.
Oh, yeah.
The rules that we had to deal with. I mean, football back in the day when I was playing football, you weren't allowed to have water even in the hot sun, right?
Yeah,
That's
so
changed,
yeah.
right? So like it was borderline like emotionally and like physically at times abusive, right? So we all grew up in that wave of coaching where it was like kind of like a, socially accepted thing. It's not the case anymore, right? Safe sport. And you have all these different certifications that you need to get through USA Hockey in order to be on that ice. And you have accountability, an accountability structure with the board of that organization or the director or the skills director, whoever it is. There's a lot of people to answer to as a crappy coach, right? And not to mention, parents have a choice now to leave you. Yep. And so you better not be a crappy coach if you want to, or like a bad person or angry and dismissive if you want to retain people. So I think what's happened, the epiphany I had is like, we talk about mental health constantly. Well, what's going on there? Let's unpack it. We have a PTSD response to loud voices or reprimanding or accountability, right? What you might see is happening. Your kid is maybe being told or limited ice time at the 14U level because he's just not there yet. But you as a kid may place yourself back when you were 14 and you couldn't fight that fight. Right? And now you're trying to swoop in and save the day for your kid. Yeah. Because nobody else did for you when you were a kid. I don't know. It's a theory I have. I'm not a mental health professional, but I can see where that, when I'm in therapy myself, I've learned about, hey, I'm triggered right now.
That's not how my dad would have handled it. My dad said nobody bailed him out. Figure it out yourself.
Exactly. And that's the thing. That's what needs to be understood. And that's kind of my point. Like, let's look in the mirror. Like, why am I triggered right now? Yeah. I have to do that for therapy. I'm triggered. Let me understand why I'm triggered. And, because back in the day, this happened with this coach or this teacher or this kid on the playground, whatever it is, I'm triggered. So what is it about me? Not about the coach. Let's stop looking out the window. Let's look in the mirror. And then let's give our kid the tools they need to navigate that. And let's remember and be mindful of the fact that you've paid a lot of money. You've made an investment. That's great. You're not going to get a return on your investment if you send a nasty email and you try to coach that team, or you try to tell the coaches how to coach your kid, or you try to tell the coaches how to whatever, and you raise issues with things that really aren't that big of a deal, but we've kind of made them a big deal. Not to be dismissive, but we kind of feel like it's bigger than it actually is. And what you end up doing in that instance is, especially if it's a conversation in front of your kid at a younger age where they're not emotionally mature to like understand this, the life lesson you're teaching your kid at that point is I can get coach in trouble whenever I want. Yeah. As opposed to saying, hey, you don't like that you got yelled at for being on the ice too long? Well, coach was losing his voice because he's yelling your name because you're taking 3-minute shifts and other kids are suffering on the bench because you're not sharing ice at whatever and whatever level. And hey, buddy, why don't you go ask the coach? I don't care if he's 8. Tell your kid to ask the coach, why do you hate me? And what coach at a 10U level is dealing with an 8U player, and an 8-year-old comes up to him and says, "Why do you hate me?" Don't think for a second that coach's heart isn't going to explode out of his chest.
Right.
He's going to try to make it right for that kid right there. And his kid handled it. Your kid handled it. It'll change from there. Or 14, 16, 18U level. Hey, coach, why am I on the power play?
Yeah,
What can I do?
What can I do?
Right? And give your coach the power to coach your son. The number one complaint I get from parents is, oh, he's not being coached. Well, I know the internal guts of that. Your coach started out being Mr. Nice Guy trying to reach your son. Then it turned out he's trying to be harder on him to reach him. And then he's just kind of like gotten to the point where now he's got enough discourse and conversations with you where he has the sense and the vibe that maybe you're telling him something completely different in the car on the way home from practice or a game, based on his behavior and his interaction with the group and the way he takes constructive criticism as a kid. Well, he can't reach him. So now he's just given up. So now you're watching your investment go right down the drain because you got involved.
Yeah.
Right now, if it's something that is important, slamming a clipboard over the kid's head or
yeah.
cussing at the kids or the group,
Yeah.
or singling out kids too much or whatever that is.
Stuff that actually has to be dealt with.
That has to be dealt with,
Yeah.
safe sport related.
Yeah.
That's a different thing.
For
But if
sure.
it's something that's like, you know what? Why don't we just, instead of trying to like save our kid from it, why don't we provide some tools to help the kid navigate it? Because he's going to need that later in life.
No.
And I can think of several instances in my life, and it's still ongoing. I have two choices: stand up for myself and speak up for myself, or deal with it.
No.
There's no, if I got a problem, my dad lives in Wisconsin. He ain't going to come to Utah and save me.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I got an issue, a conflict. My dad's not going to call him on my behalf and ream him out for me. Like, it's not going to happen. And some people would disagree with me and say, well, that's too young. Well, no, you can still provide your kids tools.
That's what sports are supposed to be.
Yep.
Honestly, and I think we lose sight of that with the wins and losses or the college scholarships. I mean, how many people did you grow up with that had full ride scholarships with you that you played with? Well, I mean, you mentioned quite a few, but the majority of them didn't, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So,
yeah. If I look at the Madison Capitals AAA roster, I'm pretty sure Phil Kessel's the only one.
Yeah, that's a pretty big name. But yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The purpose of sports for me is to teach you how to deal with everything. For me, hockey's therapy. It's what I love to do to make me sane for all the other stuff I go through in my with my job, particularly. And that's why I'm still playing at 51 years old. And I hope that's what I pass on to my kids. And I hope that's what I pass on to all the kids that I coached. And that's one of the reasons I love having you on the show, man. You're just so well spoken with the stuff you're saying. And I hope everybody's listening to that, because that's it right there. Give them the tools to handle it by themselves with a coach. And as a coach that's had kids come up to me, and I've brought this up on the show a few times, I tried to just roll lines up until they were...
Well, you pick them, you play them.
Yeah, and there was a point where I did tell a kid that I was, like, I had injuries and I just had an extra forward. And we're in a state championship situation, and I'm like, I'm going to get you in. He wasn't my best kid. He was one of my favorite kids, but he wasn't one of my best players. And I'm like, you're going to be my secret weapon. I'm not going to use you a ton in the first period. Well, the game was close. I didn't use him a lot in the second period either.
Yeah, and I think that's good, and I think it's healthy. We there's a lot of discussions about parents in youth sports, but let's talk about the coaches for a second, right? Like, the coaches set themselves up for this.
Yeah.
How do they set them up? Well, they don't have a parent meeting. They don't establish boundaries. Please do not call me at 9, 10 o'clock at night. If you send me an email at late in the evening, you're probably not going to get a response for 24 hours after the fact, right? Or later.
Well, shouldn't that be the standard, though, right? Is a 24-hour cool-off period?
24-hour rule is good. It's
Is
healthy. But for me, I've shifted gears. When people want to talk, I want to talk in person now.
Okay.
Right? I don't think, I want to see what's going on with you emotionally. I want to see your body language, right? Are you hot, right? And are you in a healthy space for dialogue? I want to be in a healthy space too. Am I hot? Right? Like, I need to be, and I want to see those things in person. I think that's really healthy. And my response, Troy Ward, good friend of mine, mentor of mine, he says it on my show. I'm not even doing my show anymore, really. But he's going to sit down and listen to you. And so am I. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to do my best to not be dismissive. I'm going to hear what you have to say in terms of feedback, whether it's related directly to your kid, which it usually is, or the group, or whatever your problems are, or the program itself, whatever it is. And I'm going to hear you out. And most likely, I'm going to respond with, thank you for your feedback. I really appreciate this conversation and your tone. I'm going to go take this information, your feedback, and I'm going to talk to my coaching staff about it. If it relates to just specifically your player, it's going to be hard to make a change, but we're open to it. If it relates to the group, it's something that we definitely need to review. Okay? But as of right this second, I do not have an answer for you. So what I'm going to ask from you is patience and time. And if you cannot give me patience and time, you are not a reasonable person.
Has this worked for you? Like being able to have a parent come to you right after a game or a practice even, and when they're hot?
Never works.
Okay.
Never works. So as a coach, I have to express that. Let's talk about the coaches. So it's like, coach, if you don't want that to happen, then you make sure you have a parent meeting and you try your best to get everybody in attendance and you explain those things. What's your development model? What's your plan, right? According to that model. What are your boundaries for behavior relation at the rink during games and during practice for parents? What's your requirements and your expectations for behavior from your players and your students, right? How are you going to teach, not coach, how are you going to teach these players about life through this sport, right? And then you establish this boundary. If you are hot, I don't want to hear from you. I want you to go home and I want you to think about that nasty email you're about to write, because there's a good chance tomorrow you're not going to write it.
Emotion always loses.
Yep. So let's place that boundary there. Now, that's a mistake that a lot of coaches make. The second mistake a lot of coaches make is they're going for the win. Why? You could say what came first, the chicken or the egg. It's because mom and dad expect a lot of wins because they don't understand that it's not about wins at this level. It's about development. Or you could just say you have fantasy hockey league syndrome. And now you finally have your fantasy sports team in real life, but it's at 10U.
Yeah.
Right? Here's your ego. And now we're going to chalk up, I'm a good coach based off how many wins I have or how good our team is at 10U. Dude, it is so easy to develop good players. It is so hard to grow the game and develop the thumpers, or I like to call them the beauty group. Kids that are swinging their stick in line, watching butterflies as you talk. If you had them mic'd up, you'd have one heck of an episode, right? The beauty group, right? So those kids are a challenge. But let's not dismiss that group of kids, because there's probably 4 or 5 kids in that group, because of the energy and the ADHD and whatever's going on there, they're probably going to be really good athletes down the line, right? So let's not dismiss them just because today they're not an elite 8 or 9-year-old hockey player. Let's dig in and dig deep and learn how to coach those kids and adapt to them. Don't force them to adapt to you. They're not going to. Adapt to them, right? As a coach, stop trying to win, only win hockey games. If you focus on development and you focus on life lessons and incentivizing competitiveness, I'm going to teach these kids how to compete. These little kids that are little runts in the back of the line screwing around while I'm talking, I'm going to teach those kids by the end of the year what it feels like physically and mentally to compete, meaning they're putting in their best effort. They know it. And once I get them there, hopefully by the halfway point of that season, I can teach that group of kids anything, and they will play at pace, even if they're skating around cones, because they know what it feels like. Let's remember that these are kids.
Oh.
Right? Let's adapt to these kids. These are not adults. If you sit a kid at 10U or 12U hockey, what are you doing to them? Right. You are telling them that they're not worth it.
And you're going to kill their passion.
They are not emotionally mature enough to cope with that. So, as a coach, if you pick that player, you play him.
Yeah, I love it.
And the way I grew up, my dad was my coach. He would go with, it was a 2-1 hockey game, we needed a tie goal. You know who he'd play? he wouldn't play the same horses every single game. He played who was competing the hardest.
Oh, okay.
Who was having the best game.
Yeah,
it was like, hey, this kid's got it. Jack, you take a seat. You know how many times that happened to me? Like the last 2 minutes of the game? And I'm like mad, but I'm like, I know I haven't played well today. It's an accountability thing. And of course, he would explain that to me in the car ride home. He was my dad in the car. He was my coach at the rink. That's how it worked with us. And I understood that, like, oh, if I want more, I need to put in more. This isn't a participation award.
Yeah.
This is, you earn it.
Yeah,
right?
I love that. And on my show, and I'm going to just say them by name because they've both been on my show, and they both know they were the beauty players at times as they were developing. But two of the most successful players we've had out of Utah with, I'm going to forget which
Lewis,
Brickley it is.
Right.
Huh?
Trevor Lewis.
Well, Trevor, but he always put in the effort, and he wasn't the beauty kid. He was always the kid put in an effort, and he'd always pay attention. But we had little Brickley, Daniel Brickley, who was he was a beauty kid, and then we had Garrett Metcalf, who was a beauty kid. He, like your definition of beauty kid, he didn't have the drive at the younger age, and then as they got older, it kicked in, and they became our best players. And coaches didn't give up on them. They still got opportunities. They still came to the rink. They still played. And, you know, I love their story. I love that fact about them, that they weren't the best players. Because we did have, you know, Nick Halloran, who was a kid I coached, who's playing in Europe right now and was in the LA Kings system. And then obviously Trevor.
Sure.
So we've had them both. Like, and it's one of those experience things when you get older and you're like, you had the opportunity to watch these kids grow, and it wasn't the ones that you thought were going to make it.
It never is.
And that's the thing I really want to teach is like I hoped I did it right. And in my mind, I remember the time I didn't do it right. I remember the time that I sat a kid that I shouldn't have sat, and it still bugs me that I should have given this kid more shifts in the state championship. And it went against the way I like to coach.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of the time, I like to believe I did it right, and I kept these kids playing. And I like to think that the other coaches around here did that too.
Well, what I love too is, like, you know, as a coach, if you always look at your true north as like, if you do it, develop a model. It doesn't matter. Develop the model. Like, figure it out. It could be yours. It can be somebody else's. Mine's all over my website. Take it. I don't care. Take it. Put your own information in it. I got it from Troy Ward. He gave it to me, and I put my own information in it. I thought it was a brilliant model.
Yeah.
And I'm like, mind, body, skill, systems, games. Well, if you don't have mind, you don't have body. If you don't have mind, you don't have body and skills. If you don't have mind, body, and skills, let's not even talk about systems. Good luck. Like, if you don't have all those things leading up to games, well, we're probably going to suffer in games. Like, what I see at the younger age levels, systems to win games. And if you look at that model, mind, body, skills, systems, games that we use for JSHA, our academy, if you flip it upside down, that's a parent model. And some coaches coach parent models.
Yeah.
I want more games. But we're going to play games because we want to win games. And then because we want to win games, we're going to do systems and we're going to do positioning, even at like 10U. And then we're going to do private lessons and skating around cones and all this stuff and skill development. And then body, maybe we'll do dry land, but my kid doesn't like it. It's too hard for him. Or like, we don't want to play other sports at younger ages. You know, we just want to focus on hockey, whatever that is. And then mind is a complete afterthought. We don't even work on the mind. How we work on the mind is, this is what we say to our kids. You should have played more time than that kid. Yeah. Or a coach doesn't know what he's doing. That's how you're going to grow the mind? Oh, okay. Right? So we've reversed that whole process when it's like, man, like let's teach our kids the right tools they need. Let's teach them how to have an open mind to be coachable. Let's teach them what it mentally and physically feels like to have internal fuel and compete. Right? Let's get to the body. Let's teach them the importance of taking care of themselves, especially at the older age levels. You know, and playing other sports and developing as a holistic athlete, not just being like sport specific and early specialization. And then let's get to skills development. Let's break that down. And then let's get to systems later on and how all those things fill in the systems. And then those things, if we hit all those marks, you're probably going to win some hockey games.
Yeah. Man, I hope people are taking what you're putting down here, and that's one of the main reasons I wanted you on the show. One of the other things, and we wanted to talk about. I don't want to get too much into your scouting. Let's talk a little bit about. You've been to these games. The NHL's here now. You got to see our club. People want to know. We just dropped a couple games in a row. We're not scoring all of a sudden. What's your take on the team? What should fans be excited about, and what changes would you make if you were running the show? Or is that too much to ask?
Yeah, I won't answer that one because I'm not running the show.
Just so you don't mind.
And I'm learning. And I would say it's an exciting team.
Yeah.
It really is. They have a lot of future depth. They have a lot of young players on this team. And I think you manage the expectations from there. They're young, right? They're developing. They're still learning, and they're what does it mean to be a 200-foot hockey player? How does that look? Like some of the youngest players on that roster. Some of them already know. I don't view the NHL as a developmental league, by the way. I think the AHL is there for a reason.
Right.
Those players that are on the roster are NHL ready, right? But it's exciting. They got a lot of offensive players. They can make great plays. They have elite touches with the puck. The defensemen, there's a solid D core. Obviously, some injuries hurt a little bit, but the future's bright, and I think this team can win today. I think they can, make the playoffs. And knowing what I know from playing in the NHL, it's whoever makes the playoffs. It's hey, you get a hot goaltender, or you guys get hot at the right time, you could go all the way. I mean, look at 2012 with the LA Kings.
Right.
They got in with a wild card and they won the whole thing, right? So I think it's just like the main goal is get to the playoffs and then take it from there. And I think this team can do that. And I think I've really enjoyed watching this team. With this new scouting job, I'm in charge of scouting Utah on their roster. I really like what I see. And I think Andre's a great coach.
I do too.
I think he's a great hockey mind. I think Bill Armstrong's a great hockey mind and a great GM. John Ferguson Jr., assistant GM, he's great too. And I've met some of their, skills coaches and player development staff. Like they have a really good staff, and they're all pulling the rope in the same direction. I think the future's bright.
Were you surprised to see how good their staff was, considering how the situation they're coming from, not winning games, granted they're in a rebuild, whatever,
sure.
like a 30-year rebuild at some points. Honestly, though, we know they're in a rebuild and we know they're putting all the right pieces together. But it didn't look that way last year. If you were a guy looking from the outside in going, oh, yeah, it's Arizona just doing salary dumps. Were you surprised? Because I'll just say, I don't want to get you in trouble, but I'll say I was surprised when I started really meeting and talking to these guys. I'm like, wow, that guy blew all my expectations. Bill Armstrong, phenomenal GM.
I think the NHL, there's no question, it's about monetary resources.
Right.
Right? I think they were handcuffed quite a bit in Arizona. Yeah. I think that, it doesn't, you can see the forest through the trees pretty clear on that one. Right? So I think now they got an owner that's like, hey, let's win. Yeah. Let's go. Right? And he's excited.
That's literally his face. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's go. The time is now. Yeah. Right. And it's like, whoa. And I think that there was maybe a little bit of a culture shock. I would imagine it was a culture shock for them, dealing with what was going on in Arizona for the last several years. And then all of a sudden you got this guy. It's like, what you name it, you got it. Right. And I think that's really cool. And I think that Bill Armstrong and John Ferguson Jr. and their staff and Andre, they're all going to be able to show their stuff. It's going to be on full display.
I want you and George on the show. I want to talk more about youth hockey. You're a wealth of knowledge, and I'm going to keep tapping into it because I think you're amazing, and thank you for being in this market. I think it's not going to be too long till you can't come on the show unless I run it through the Utah Hockey Club. I truly believe the more you talk and the more they hear you talk, I just know they're going to grab you.
Well,
I can see you working over there.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope to work with them regardless of anything. I want to see them be successful.
Well, I'm sorry we ran out of time because I have about 1,000 more questions for you. But if you loved hearing from Jack, you have any questions or anything else you want to know, feel free to email us. Jack, how do they get a hold of you?
You can look up on my website, jackskillehockeyacademy.com. My contact information's all over the place. and sign your kids up for our programs. I'd love to see you and meet you in person.
Absolutely, sign your kids up to that program. That's got to be one of the best around. And that is the Utah Puck Report. Want to give a special thanks to Chipman Roofing. These are hockey people supporting the hockey community. It's Chipman Roofing. For all your roofing needs, just check out chipmanroofing.com. And if you like what you hear on the podcast, please leave a review, leave a rating. Wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure you give us a rating. Like to check out KSLSports.com as well. There's going to be more hockey on there. As more hockey comes up, it's going to be always right there, KSLSports.com. Big thanks to Madison Miller for putting up with us.